Hello, everyone. I'm ZHAO Chuang. Today, let's draw the tail of Parasaurolophus. Parasaurolophus had a very thick tail. The base of its tail adjacent to the ischium was especially large and broad. Its tail had several sets of strong muscles, and this narrow string of muscle on the dorsal side pulled the tail upwards and kept it from touching the ground. If you saw early reconstructions of dinosaurs, you would find that people once believed that dinosaurs' tails were dragging on the ground. But now we know that dinosaurs' tails were hanging in the air, and this set of muscles was the reason why. The two sets of strong muscles on the sides were responsible for swinging the tail from side to side. Under its tail, there was a heavy lump of extra flesh, from the ischium to the middle section of the tail, which made the entire tail and body form a streamlined shape. Now let's draw the tail. Before drawing the tail, let's first determine its width. Parasaurolophus had a very broad tail. Let's set its height here. Assuming we draw the tail something about this width, so the tip should be here. Leave space at the front to draw its legs. To correctly draw the tail of Parasaurolophus, we must first understand its internal skeletal structure. First, draw the position of its legs from the front. This was its thigh. This was the femur, and there was a bulge protruding backward here. The upper part of the femur was the ilium, which was like this. There was flap-shaped structure that protruded outwards and bended downwards. It was a very important structure used to immobilize the muscles. Its pubis was attached below the ilium, which became very small, and shaped like a sharp spike. Then we draw its long ischium. Its tip looked a bit like a boot. Then there was a set of sacral vertebrae between the left and right ilium bones. The sacral vertebrae were composed of a series of neural spines. Which together formed a very large and flat plate-like structure. The sacral vertebrae bones were shorter in the front and higher in the back, so that the tail root was in a very high position. Behind the sacral vertebrae were the caudal vertebrae. The caudal vertebra was composed of the vertebral body with the neural spine on top. The neural spines of the caudal vertebrae were much thinner than those of the sacral vertebrae, and they became shorter and shorter as going backward. Let's draw a rough diagram. There was nothing under the first few caudal vertebrae, and by the area farther from the ischium, there was this structure called the chevron, which was evolved from the ribs on the tail. The root of each chevron was located between two vertebral bodies and protruded obliquely backward. I won't draw them one by one. I'll just draw their position. The vertebral bodies continued like this. It was very long, and gradually got smaller. The neural spines were getting shorter and shorter, gradually forming an area like this. The same goes for the chevrons, which became shorter and shorter all the way, forming such a structure at the tip of the tail. There was also a structure on the side of the vertebral body, a transverse process that protruded to the side. We can't see it from the side, but it was actually a plate-like structure that protruded outwards. This structure has a very important role, because it was what bounded the upper and lower sets of the tail muscles. There were a lot of muscles on both sides of the neural spine, and on both sides of the vertebral body and the chevron too. In the middle, there were two sets of muscles divided by the transverse processes. The muscles below the tail extended from the back of the pelvis and wrapped it up like this. A part of the muscles of the thigh were here. This structure also bounded the muscles of the thigh into two sets. There was a protuberance at the back of the thigh, which had several sets of muscles, connected to the tail all the way to where the chevrons started. The entire muscle distribution of its tail was like this. With this line as the boundary, there was a set of muscles under, and the upper muscles crossed the pelvis, and went forward to form a huge string of muscle, with muscles at the neural spines of the pelvis and sacral vertebrae, and the ones at neural spines of the back. Bearing this in mind, let's draw its reconstruction. The upper part of the thigh was like this. These were the muscles of the legs. It's a basic reference when we try to reconstruct the muscles of dinosaurs. This was the back of the thigh, and then the inner side of the thigh was connected by a set of muscles. Now some fossils prove that there was a set of thinner skin linked to the back of its legs and tail, which would block this set of muscles. With the top of the pelvis as the boundary line, here was the muscle under the tail, which roughly extended like this. These were the neural spines of its sacral vertebrae, with its highest at this point, and it went downward from here. Here were the muscles on top of its tail. These muscles could be divided into two main parts. Some intact hadrosaur specimens show a heavy lump of extra flesh below the chevrons, possibly for fat storage. If the chevrons were in this position, we need to draw the tail thicker than the chevrons, and draw the extra flesh under the tail. Below was the position of its ischium, which extended backward like this. On the back we can draw some ornament structure that was very common in hadrosaurs. At the end of the tail, these structures were getting sparse, and were less dense than the body. There are some hadrosaur fossils showing rows of button-sized scales underneath the tail, where it was near the belly. Good, like this, we've finished drawing the tail of Parasaurolophus.